From a single point in space of almost infinite mass, the Big Bang was created. An explosion of the mass sent tiny particles out through space. The earliest known time after the Big Bang is 10 to the negative 43rd seconds. At this time, all the four fundamental forces are equal to each other. The explosion also released an enormous amount of energy that heated the universe up to 5.5 billion degrees Celsius. After about 10 to the negative 6 seconds after the Big Bang, protons, electrons, and neutrons formed. Through strong nuclear forces and gravity, protons, electrons, and neutrons came together to form atoms. The first atoms in the universe were hydrogen and helium because those are the simplest atoms. After the first few minutes of the universe, most of the atoms were hydrogen and helium. After about 100 million years after the Big Bang, hydrogen and helium began to gather together and form stars. The oldest known star today is 13.2 billion years old, putting its formation a little after this time. Galaxies were beginning to form around this time too, as the collection of stars and rock gained mass and gravity, bringing in surrounding objects. Around 13 billion years ago, 800 million years after the formation of stars, was when black holes were first formed. Black holes are created when a star collapses without a supernova explosion, or a protoneutron star has a low-energy explosion that falls back on itself. They then form a point in space that has a mass of 10 to 1,000 solar masses, and its gravitational potential is greater than the speed of light. This picture is an X-ray wave image from a black hole. At about 12.8 billion years ago, the first normal galaxies are formed. These consist of multi-generational stars. 200 million years later, pulsars start forming with star groups. 100 million years later, after that, globular clusters start forming. This includes the Milky Way. Infrared galaxies are formed too. During this 7 billion year period, the Milky Way is forming with star clusters and a halo of gas and material. Galaxies are formed and gather together for the next 2 billion years. During this time, multiple supernovas occur though. At about 10.8 billion years ago, there is believed to be habitable planets formed in different galaxies and solar systems. The planets are believed to be in the Goldilocks zone around a star and be developed enough to hold water and life. Examples of these are in the Gillis planetary system. From 11.8 to 6.2 billion years ago, galaxies were maturing and shaping into what we see them as now, with defined spirals and shapes. During this time, some galaxies collided and formed a single, bigger galaxy. This process is extremely destructive, but after millions of years, the galaxy will return to normal. At 9.8 billion years ago, the Andromeda Galaxy began its collision course with the Milky Way, and will collide in about 4.5 billion years from today. Evidence for dark energy was found to be around 9.0 billion years ago. Dark energy contradicts gravity, dark matter, and forces pulling objects together, expanding the universe. The expansion of the universe first started out slow and gradually got faster. At around 7.8 billion years ago, the acceleration of expansion started where the universe is expanding rapidly. Dark matter is the opposing force and makes up about 27% of the universe, slowing down the expansion a tiny bit. At 4.6 billion years ago, a supernova triggered the creation of our solar system in the Milky Way. Gases started to form together and create the first planets in the Sun. The first planets formed were Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. Around 4.5 billion years ago, the terrestrial planets began to form. Gases and rock came together because of gravity. Planets made a final destination for many large asteroids and meteors, creating more mass on the forming planets. Earth formed like the other planets and became molten. This creates the spherical shape of the planets and Earth. Heavy metallic materials from asteroids and meteors, since they were denser, went down to the core of the planet, while other materials stayed on top. This created the magnetic poles of the planet. As the top of the planet cools, it creates a hard rock crust. The mantle is still molten because it is insulated now by the crust, cooling slower. During the formation of Earth, around 4.5 billion years ago, the Moon was formed. It is believed that a huge object collided with the forming Earth and caused a large chunk to break off, thus creating the bases of the Moon. Moons, like planets, then gather material from surrounding gases and asteroids to grow larger. Moon rocks that were gathered back in the 60s and 70s found that the Moon used to have a magnetic field, telling scientists more about the composition of the Moon. Because the mantle is still molten and moving on Earth, it creates the plate tectonics. These are large pieces of crust that move separately from each other. These plates then collide later to form mountains, canyons, and other landforms. The plates move very slowly and it takes millions of years to form mountains. Collisions on this new crust from asteroids caused craters and gases to spew out from the lower mantle into the atmosphere. These asteroids consisted of frozen water along with rocky material putting water on the Earth. Along with asteroid deposition of water on the planet, oxygen and hydrogen react together to form water. At 4.4 billion years ago, Earth was one huge ocean beside a few islands. As the plates moved, more of the mantle spewed out, creating more islands like it still does today. Around 3.8 billion years ago, the first bacterial life emerged. These bacteria were prokaryotes. The first believed multicellular organisms formed around 3.6 billion years ago. Around 3.0 billion years ago, the first viruses are present. Around 2.4 to 2.0 billion years ago was the Great Oxidation Event. Oxygen created by photosynthetic bacteria and melting of ice from global freezes begins to build up in the atmosphere. The addition of oxygen to the atmosphere increases its ability to insulate the planet and protect it from materials coming in. The picture is of fossils of masses of the first photosynthetic cells. 900 million years ago, eukaryotic organisms began to evolve into separate families: animals, plants, and fungi. Multicellular organisms began to split and evolve too. The first water creatures are placozoa and are tiny, thin creatures. Then another ice age happens 850 million years ago. Creatures evolved through millions of years and into different species and sizes until today.